The delegation arrived while I was mid-entry on the Valdesi Reach. 6 conclave observers in formal gray, led by a sub-arbiter whose name I have since chosen not to record. They came to watch me file the humans, that was how they put it. Come to watch the filing. As if the humans were a dead campaign waiting to be shelved. As if I were going to open a drawer, slide in a card, close it again. I should have sent them away, I did not. That is the part I carry. The Grand Taxonomy Hall of the Conclave Archive is not a comfortable place. It was not designed for comfort. The vaulted ceiling runs 40 meters overhead, faced in cold pale stone, and the light that filters through the classification columns is blue-white and diffuse. The color of a star that gives warmth to nothing. Every species we have encountered in 400 years of expansion is filed here. Every campaign, every contact record, every survey, every extinction. The hall holds them all with the same equanimity. It does not care what they were. It only notes what they became. The sub-arbiter stood at my shoulder as I pulled the human archive to the primary display column. She had the look of someone who had already decided what she was about to see. Tidy. Confident. Her delegation fanned out behind her in a neat arc, the way officials do when they believe the work ahead of them is administrative. The conclave's position, she said, is that the human designation has been overclassified. The probe fleet dispatched last season will return within the month with current survey data. Expect to refile humans under Standard Emerging Civilization, Category 3. I did not argue. I opened the file and began to read. The oldest entry is 411 years old. A Thalvosi cartographic expedition, my own people, as it happens, charted the outer edge of what we would later call the exclusion corridor. The record is brief. 12 vessels, full manifest, survey route logged. No anomalies reported at departure. The returned column carries a single notation in the hand of the port authority who waited. For them, beacons ceased. No wreckage recovered. File open. The file had been open for 411 years. I read that entry aloud. The sub-arbiter said nothing. The second entry is from the Macquarie Protectorate. 270 years ago, a Macquarie commercial convoy, 11 vessels, mostly freighters, 1 escort, plotted a course that clipped the inner edge of the corridor. They had charts, but the charts were 80 years old and had not been updated because the survey fleets sent to update them had not come back. The Macquarie convoy did not know this. Their navigation logs, recovered from a probe that came within signal range but did not enter the corridor, show that they were discussing cargo manifests when they crossed the line. Routine. Routine right up to the point where the beacons went dark. The sub-arbiter's adjutant made a note on his tablet. I kept reading. Entry 7 is the one that tends to silence a room. The Drevathi expansion, 160 years ago, the most organized incursion in the record. 44 vessels. A proper fleet, not a survey group or a commercial convoy. The Drevathi had studied the previous incursions and concluded that the losses were the result of poor coordination and insufficient firepower. They sent a battle fleet with full logistics support, a dedicated command vessel, and a communication relay system designed to maintain contact through the corridor's interference. The relay system worked. We received transmissions from the Drevathi fleet for 11 days after entry, 44 vessels, logging position and status on schedule, professional and orderly. On day 12, the relay station on the corridor's edge received a single burst transmission from the command vessel. It was not distress traffic. It was the Drevathi admiral filing a final operations log. Status of each vessel, position. The log was complete and properly formatted. It closed with a standard command authorization signature. Then nothing. 44 vessels. Not wreckage. Not distress signals. Not a single crew member recovered. The relay station waited for 180 standard days before the Drevathi Protectorate formally closed the entry and filed the fleet as lost. The Drevathi Protectorate itself closed 40 years later. Causes unrelated. But I have always noted the sequence. I was on entries 9 when the first of the probe fleet signals failed. The sub-arbiter's personal communicator chirped. The subdued tone of a priority relay, and she glanced at it and then looked at the display column, where I was reading, and her expression did not change, which told me that she was practiced at keeping her expression from changing. Technical fault, she said to her adjutant, not to me. I continued with entry 9. The Selvith mission, a deliberate contact attempt, 60 years ago, not a military force, a diplomatic convoy. 3 vessels, unarmed, broadcasting standard contact protocols on every frequency. The Selvith had theorized that the previous losses were the result of misread military intent. They would approach without weapons. They would announce themselves openly. They would demonstrate, through posture and signal, that they came with no aggressive purpose. Their signals were received at the corridor's edge for 6 hours after crossing. Then the signals stopped. We found one of their vessels, eventually. It drifted back out of the corridor 14 months later, on its own, with no crew aboard. The life support systems were functioning. Food stores were largely untouched. The navigation system had been manually set to a return heading sometime during those 6 hours, set precisely, deliberately by someone who knew what they were doing. The vessel arrived home in perfect mechanical condition. There was no entry in the ship's log after hour 4. I paused in my reading there, not for effect. I was checking the timestamp on entry 10, because I want to be precise in all things, and I had noticed that the Selvith entry and entry 10 were written by the same archivist, a predecessor of mine named Corvathen, who retired shortly after completing entry 10 and did not, to my knowledge, speak publicly about the archive's human file for the remainder of a long life. The subarbiter's communicator chirped again. This time she did not explain it. I read entry 10. Entry 10 is not a fleet incursion. It is a single vessel, a conclave survey runner, 32 years ago, which strayed across corridor boundary due to a navigation error and corrected course within minutes. They were inside human space for less than an hour. They exited intact, crew whole, vessel undamaged. They filed a standard incident report. The incident report contains one unusual notation. The survey runner's senior observer wrote in the supplemental remarks field, during the period of boundary incursion, passive sensors registered multiple structured contacts at close range. Contacts did not pursue after boundary correction. Recommend this incident not be used to update threat assessment. The contacts knew we had made an error. They let us leave. That notation has sat in the supplemental remarks field for 32 years. It has never been cited in a policy document. I do not know whether anyone on the current conclave had read it before today. I looked at the subarbiter. She was reading her communicator. Her adjutant was very still. How many of the probe fleet's beacons are still transmitting, I asked. She did not answer immediately. Then, 2. There had been 8 probes. I had noted the deployment manifest when the mission was filed 3 months ago. I returned to the display column. There were 7 more entries before the current date. I read them all. I read them the way you read a column of figures that keep arriving at the same sum regardless of how carefully you check the arithmetic. The details varied. Species, fleet sizes, intentions, levels of preparation, sophistication of communication equipment, quality of tactical planning. The sum did not vary. The returned column remained blank. Entry after entry, the returned column remained blank, and the only thing that changed was the date and the name of the species, and the number of vessels that had made the same decision with the same result. I was reading the entry from 11 years ago. A Keth commercial survey, 4 vessels, gone in 48 hours, when the subarbiter said very quietly, "The last beacon has stopped." The hall was silent. Not because it is always silent, though it is. But this was a different quality of silence. The kind that fills a room when everyone in it has just understood something that cannot be ununderstood. The delegation stood in their neat arc behind the subarbiter. They were not taking notes anymore. The adjutant's tablet was at his side. One of the observers in the back of the group had moved, slightly closer to the others, in the unconscious way that social animals do when they become uncertain about the dimensions of a space. I closed the incursion log. I opened the species taxonomy form, the standard filing template used for every civilization in the archive. First contact record to the final notation. The form has fields: contact type, technology tier, communication capacity, social structure, territorial range, threat classification, diplomatic status, estimated population, cultural assessment. I sat with the form open for a long time. The subarbiter was watching me. She said nothing. Whatever authority she had arrived with, whatever position the conclave had sent her to assert, whatever Category 3 reclassification she had come to authorize. She said nothing. I closed the taxonomy form without entering a single field. In its place, I opened the exclusion registry. The shorter document, the one used not for species assessment but for hazard notation. The form used for anomalies, for regions, for phenomena, the archive has determined it cannot measure, and therefore will not attempt to measure. In the notation field, I typed 7 words: unclassifiable, do not approach, file remains open. I filed it. The system accepted the entry, stamped it with my authorization, and placed it in the exclusion registry between a gravitational anomaly in the Veth corridor and a biological hazard zone in the outer Macquarie reach. The subarbiter read the notation on the display column. She did not object. She did not invoke conclave authority or speak of reclassification or mention the probe fleet, which no longer had any beacons to invoke. She said, "Is there anything in the file that explains?" "No," I said. That was not entirely accurate. The survey runner's supplemental remark, "They let us leave," is an explanation of a kind. But it is not the kind of explanation that helps. It is the kind that makes the silence in a 40-meter hall feel considerably larger than 40 meters. The delegation left. I remained. I have worked in this hall for 31 years. I have filed extinctions. I have filed species so hostile that entire conclave sectors were restructured around avoiding them. I have filed things the conclave does not discuss in public session and does not include in the standard archive index. I have never before filed a species in the exclusion registry. That category is for places and phenomena. It is not for civilizations. The humans do not fit in any of the civilization fields. They do not fit in the threat fields or the diplomatic fields or the cultural assessment fields. They fit in none of the taxonomic structures we have built in 400 years of cataloging the galaxy's inhabitants, because all of those structures assume a subject that can be characterized by its behavior toward those who approach it. The humans have only ever had one behavior toward those who approach without invitation. We have 411 years of entries documenting that behavior. We have no entries documenting anything else. The file is open. It will remain open. I will not be the archivist who closes it, because closing it would require writing a final notation, and there is no final notation to write. There is only the column. Entry after entry, species after species, fleet after fleet, the same returned field, and the same blank where the answer should be. I have spent 31 years in this hall. I know what a closed file looks like. The human file will not close.